kind of go start from normal pitch and then you rise up. And then this one does have some of the diacritical marks. So these are long A's and long I's. Okay, so that's why if there's a horizontal lines above, it's the sort of the longer vowel sound. So I hope that helps everybody a little bit. All right. Actually, so what I put here yesterday or last night. So we have, this is the Gayatri that we used during our practice, although this becomes bur instead of buhu. So bur, but everything else stay the same. And then this is the Sahana chant for y'all. And then this is the practice that we did. So let's look that over. So G chant, that's Gayatri chant, just that's my little so I have to write out Gayatri the whole time. And then I didn't necessarily do all the ascending pitch, but I did just chant this a few times, 3 times I believe, and then I showed you the Nyasa. But yeah, so we did the very beginning. We did a little with the sort of the chakra GPS, and I taught that extensively, of course, in the subtle bodies course. But I find it very helpful to find that central channel, especially since we were going to be doing, a very universal and sacred mantra. I wanted us to really kind of get that experience of really being in there, and then I also did a little bit of awareness, right, from being in that central channel, moving from the third eye to the throat, and we were so the inhale, you come to the throat, exhale back to the third eye. We were in that central channel and just thinking about infinite possibility, right? And then we went from the throat to the navel, and that was harmony, right? And then from the navel to the pelvic floor, we contained with gratitude, right? And then this idea of all of this is that this whole the light of understanding, of accelerated transformation and clarity, radiance, all that good stuff, that what the Gayatri is meaning. And then we worked on Tadasana. So again, lifting and coming down, but I would chant on inhale. So we didn't do the chant on retention. I just had you guys chant on exhale down. So I changed that a little bit from what I decided to do earlier. And then we did the Gayatri chant. I did an inhale, and then, the class chant on exhale, and we broke it down into that way. Where is it here? This would be A, B, and C, right? Would be how we did the lines. I should probably write that down somewhere. And then we did the thirds, with the, we did the exhales here. Then we did the thirds with our Virabhadrasana 1. And then we chanted and then stayed and chanted and out. And then we did our chants with our exhales here as we move a little vignette. Then we did the twists with the chants, and then you twist on the suspension, and I would chant during that, and then inhale after that. Then we have the Paschimottanasana. We worked that, and then we again connected to the central channel once more, reflected on what the meaning of that mantra is, and then I did the chants while you guys breathed with the chants, and then we chanted that, and then we did a little Nyasa. So that was the right hand with the heart and then the index. So that was the practice. And then that was the chant that we did. So questions, thoughts, experiences. Here, I'm going to stop sharing. Or maybe I'll just put it back on the thing. Questions, thoughts, experiences. How was it the rest of the evening or day? How was sleep? Did anybody wake up chanting the Gayatri? Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing. So, see everybody. Hello. unmuting. Tiffany? Yes, Tiffany's unmuted. Tiffany, do you have anything you want to share?
I woke up 5 minutes before my alarm, which was great. So slept much. Yay, finally. And great like anecdote. I told one of my clients yesterday that I was in pranayama training. They heard I was in party llama training, and we agreed that the class needed to hear that as well. So
party llama.
you're welcome.
That's awesome. So like, okay. We are extending our the actual extension in our cervical spine, Jalandhara Lamba or Jalandhara Lama, right? Anyway, that's cute. Anybody else? So thoughts, practice.
I slept well too.
Oh, good.
And I also woke up before my alarm, so it was very nice to finally get there. And I'm just glad that we have this practice and this training, because right now I'm sure some of you may struggle with it too. It's a political unrest and the debate last night, at least here in the US. And my significant other has a different political opinion than I do. So it's I'm struggling with that, I'm struggling. So I'm feeling the pitta and the heat, and this is very calming and good. And I get my frustration and aggression out with the breathing exercises and the chanting. Thank you.
Your partner is very lucky that your aggression is not directed at them. Like, you better be lucky I'm breathing. Oh my goodness, yes, this is unheard of these times. My goodness. And yes, it's causing a lot of tension within families, everything. Oh, my heart goes out to everyone. Okay, anybody else? Thank you. Well, I did promise I'd tell us a brief story about Gary chanting, and these sort of things. So, like, you know how we're talking, like sometimes like you like wake up and like, why am I, chanting in this weird language? And well, he when he studied with Krishnamacharya and Deskachar. Deskachar was his teacher, but he lived with them both in their house in Madras in India, and he was young, like 18, 19, something like that. Anyway, and he did all that sutra work, right? So that they would chant the sutras, so that same mimetic device, right? And the sutras, that's 4 chapters of a lot of Sanskrit. Anyway, and it was like call response and whatnot. So now fast forward to, this must have been around 2003, maybe. 2004. He, Gary figured out when he was in Chakradavakasana that something was wrong, and he went to the doctor, and they were like, "You've got this tumor, and you need it to, you should have been, you need surgery yesterday." And he was living on Maui at the time, and so he gets, sent immediately to California. Like it was like kind of one of those things, like boom, 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 immediately to California, to LA, and was in surgery within like a day and a half, something like that, 2 days. It was like very fast. And he's got a lot of stories from that time period because his son Mateo was about 8 or 9 years old at the time. So there's a lot of that kind of interesting stuff about aparigraha and all that he, really connected and understood with the sutras in a different way. But one of the things that I found was interesting was one of the stories was that when he came, so there was the doctors were very clear. They're like, there was a 50-50 chance you would survive. You know what I mean? So it's like, which is kind of a like, whoa, right? Like there's this moment of your own mortality. And so he does survive, obviously. And the surgery went well and whatnot, as best as it can be. But one of the things coming out, they're looking to see, if they did any damage taking that tumor out, right? And so you're looking to figure out motor skills, speech, all that stuff, right? And so apparently, so at the so his girlfriend was there, and was coming to visit him, being there, whatnot. And when one of the times when he was coming out, I guess she saw him, he was like talking as normal, but apparently one of the nurses pulled her aside, and they're like, yeah, when we were waking him up, like when he was coming out of the surgery, out of the anesthesia, they were like, definitely like keeping a close contact. They're like, he was talking gibberish. They're like, it was gibberish, like just this random weird stuff was happening, was coming out of his mouth. And we thought we thought there was some damage that had happened. And turns out, apparently, because he would do it a little bit also, even when waking up in the hospital bed, Minx realized, his girlfriend realized, that it wasn't gibberish, it was the sutras. So like the Sanskrit was coming out like a Rolodex. And so he was literally like mumbling and chanting the Sanskrit, and the nurses were like, we don't really know what he's saying. Like, we think we damaged, like something might have been damaged or something. And it was just Sanskrit, just sutras just coming out. And so, this is like how when you embed this into you, it literally is encoded into your brain and into your being. So, there you go. So that was my little story. So if you wake up, and your partner's like, what in the world are you saying? You're like, it's Sanskrit. It's okay. It's just my mantras. All right. So I thought today is all about teaching methodology, right? And a little bit, and also, homework. We're gonna talk about our homework in the afternoon, about your homework assignment. And so I don't have many slides on this, but I do have, I did make that chart for everybody. So I'm going to put that up, and it's a PDF. So I'll put it in the chat, and I know not everybody can get it from the chat, but I'll put it up on the thing. And hopefully if you can't, definitely I'll email it to you. So please, I'll try to do that as fast as I can. I know Tara's not coming on till 10, but we'll do that. And then I also have sort of another little chart PDF on like a kind of sample example of like, how would you introduce pranayama practice to your students, sort of like week by week, or like sort of like an 8-class type of deal, right? So that you can kind of have that as a way to kind of jump off, or just an idea, right? So let me get those for you. Share my screen in just a second. Make sure I have my. All right. Okay. So probably you guys want to see the chart first, yeah? The chart's what you want first. So let me go to that.
Anna Pilar, will this also be included in the presentations when you send them? A couple people in the chat are asking because they're on phones instead of on computers.
Yes, so they can email me directly, or yes, next week when it does get uploaded, right? There's a the recording. There's a section that also has that, like a link that has the PDFs, and then it has the so any other sort of like, files or whatnot, right? It's connected to it. So yes, it will be in there as well.
Okay, awesome.
Sure. You're welcome. All right, so let me share my screen. Okay, did everybody see this? Okay, hopefully. All right, so yes, I kind of went, I got really nerdy about it, if that's okay. Everybody, like, big chart. Okay, so we have here, this is just review, so let's just look at this here. So I have the column for technique, and I have a column for, what you're doing on the inhale, what you're doing versus the exhale, examples or variations that you can try, and then general effect, right? And sort of basic kind of breath preparation, and then asana preparation, right? So if we're doing something that's more breath centered asana, right, we want to make sure that the asana supports what we're doing in our pranayama. Let's see, check here. All right. And so let me also hold on. All right, let me stop sharing. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how do I. All right, hold on. Oh, I know. Let me get the chat up. I gotta put it in the chat. Oh, your chart is awesome. Thanks. All right, here. Let me just stop sharing for just a second, and then let me see about putting this directly into the chat. 1 second, and then we'll look at it again. I apologize again for my lack of amazing tech ability. This is a learning curve, of course. All right, there we go. Okay, so now that's in there. So you guys who can snag it. Otherwise, yes, we will be we will be emailing it to people. All right, so now let me share this again. So we'll go over it now. Okay, yay, everybody can see it again, and hopefully everybody, I put it in the chat. If you can snag it. Okay, so, the very first thing, honestly, I think, and I know it's not, this is not, this is not alphabetical order. This is, I think, order of what I find to be useful, right? And so, the first two are, I think, the most useful, honestly. And then I put, and these last two as well, krama. They should be up in the beginning of the chart, but I kind of got excited about all the other stuff. But ujjayi is the very first one, obviously. So very soft ujjayi, learning that technique, because that's something that happens spontaneously, right? And sometimes people will find that they have an ujjayi breath, just like the spontaneous locks. Usually it's not like full of Yana Bandha that happens spontaneously, but it's like, Mula Bandha, or the way we do Jaldar, to help regulate how we move up and down, right? And so Ujjayi is the same way. Ujjayi tends to kind of spontaneously happen sometimes as well. And then
Anna Pilar, can I ask a question about Ujjayi?
Yeah.
So the gluteus is, I had to look it up in anatomy. And then above the gluteus is
glottis.
The glottis, thank you, is I don't remember the term, but blank gluteus, like an upper gluteus.
It's the epiglottis, I think. Right, EP,
and so
maybe? Yeah.
I think that in my Ujjayi breath, I've been doing the epa, if that's even possible. I feel it in my upper throat. And then and now I've moved it down lower. Is that right? Is the valve down lower?
Well, it's, it is that whole area. So, I would say as we get more adept, it does sit lower as we get more experienced with it. I think sometimes things can be a little bit more superficial and higher up when we first start. But that's totally normal and fine. I don't, as your body is changing and adapting, it becomes more fluid, right? In how it's dealing with.
But if I were to teach it, do I
so I nobody's ever worry said about
that to me? Okay.
I wouldn't worry about that because I would just, because if they're figuring out the sound, it's not like it's the way that the nostrils are. Do you know what I mean? Where you're not valving at all. Like, you know what I'm saying? And then I'm like, yes, teach them the whole valve part, because that's the point. It's a valve. I would say when it's already kind of like, what are we doing in yoga and making weird shapes? And, that I wouldn't stress them out about, is it in the upper and the epiglottis are in the glottis. You know what I'm saying? Like I would just say it's this area of the throat. You know what I mean? This is where the vibration happens, and it's just gonna, you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't stress them out about whether or not it's right. It's because it's both of them are right. You know what I'm saying? It's just more about the awareness and the way everything is moving together. You didn't do it wrong. Your body was doing it as it was able to, and then it moved it. Do you see what I'm saying? Like it's like just a normal you can't be like, now I gotta force to the epiglottis from the epiglottis to the and then you'd be like, am I doing this right or wrong? It's just, we can't. I wouldn't stress them out. You know what I mean?
Okay,
And just
cool.
and if they come to you and say it's weird, it's starting to change, you'd be like, that's totally normal. It happened to me. and don't worry. And if anybody else has any sort of comments about that, please jump in. Let's see in the chat. All right. Okay. So yeah, but good question, Amy. So I have here like it's both. So the inhalation is through both nostrils, but the throat is valved, right? So like we want to make sure that, yes, even though we call it throat valve, we're not actually breathing through the mouth, right? Because I think sometimes people go mouth, right, when they think throat, right? And no, we're still breathing through the nostrils, but the valve is here, right? And then we adjust, like how intense the valve is for the breath flow. So that means whispering or making it louder, right? Which creates more restriction and constriction. And the general effects of what it does. And again, in my lineage and I've always heard it being heating, right? Ushna. And I know sometimes it gets taught in that it's cooling because it's the after effect that happens that's cooling, once you heat the body, like once you create that inner fire. Okay, we got Michaela in there, so that's awesome. Thank you, Michaela, for confirming that was the flat, right? But yeah, so it's this whole area. Okay, good. But we want to think about, if somebody, because it does, even the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, it does say that it is, it ignites the Agni, which is your inner fire, right? So it's heating the system. But some people might find they're cooled down after the Ujjayi because, they created this heat. And when we do that, the body sweats to help cool it down. At least that's, what how Michelle has described how Nishkala Joy Debbie teaches it, why she teaches it that way is cooling. But again, like Gary, Leslie, Rod, everybody, Donna Farhi, everybody that I've studied with, it's always very much, heating. But if you hear it the opposite, kind of know why, if that makes sense. And then, just a simple preparation for that is just learning how to breathe long and deep, right? And you don't need to do any major asana preparation to do Ujjayi, honestly, again, because it tends to be spontaneous. But then I have here the Shitali and Sitkari. What's the difference with the tongue? The variation, of course, instead of just exhaling with the Ujjayi throat valve, you can do alternate nostrils, right, on the exhale. And this is definitely a long and a cooling breath. Asana prep, of course, is we want to work that chin, that sort of stretch and the lift and the bringing it down, as well as shoulder and arm prep, because all of this area is tense, and so we want to make sure doing the shoulder prep and arm if we're going to do the variation of the alternate nostril exhale, because we have to kind of hold our arm up. Then we have the Anuloma and Viloma Ujjayi. These are where we inhale depending alternate nostrils or exhaling alternate nostrils. So if it's with the grain or against the grain, right? So we have the Anuloma is the alternate nostril exhale, and the Viloma is alternate nostril inhale, right here. And then, this is the idea, what it is, calming or Brahmana. And again, when we're doing alternate nostril stuff, it's like left and right brain integration. So when we're doing like asymmetrical postures or like one arm doing something different than the other and adding like legs to that, etc. When we do this idea of the the alternate nostril exhale, when we're doing stuff that's like connected to exhale, we want to make sure when we're looking at the postures, it's like forward bends and twists to focus on the exhale, and the opposite then for when we're working on the inhale. So back bends and laterals, right? Because that creates the expansion. Nadi Shodhana is about more, you can work both of those. Does that make sense? So a combination, nice combination of back bends, back bends or laterals, and forward bends or twists, right? Both of those, like kind of each section, because we were doing both. And then this is the idea of how one round consists of 2 breath cycles, and it's samana. And you can prep for Nadi Shodhana by using these guys, right? So, sometimes having the arm up and having to valve every single breath, inhale and exhale can get a little overwhelming for students. So it's nice to introduce either, a couple times Anuloma Ujjayi, where they're just learning how to alternate nostril exhale, or, and then next couple times they're just learning how to alternate nostril inhale. And then combining the two. So, hey, we will just work a little bit. We'll do Anuloma and then Viloma or Viloma and then Anuloma. And then the next time that they come in, maybe you do Nadi Shodhana. So, we're kind of, sort of slowly, piece by piece, getting them to kind of figure out how to valve the nostrils on both the inhale and exhale before having to do valving on every single inhale and exhale. And then we have the Pratiloma, which is that 4 rounds. Breath equals 1 cycle, or 4 breaths equals 1 cycle. So we have that idea. We have the Ujjayi in the middle. So there's an inhale, exhale with the throat valve before we switch the nostrils. Again, same preparation. And you can also use these two to help. These are specific, very specific, when we're looking at that, inhaling the left nostril, exhaling the opposite, or just staying in that one as well. Some people do it that. I would say these tend to be very, very, they're piercing. Badana means piercing. So they are very intense. I don't necessarily use these unless somebody has, unless, like, for example, in pregnancy, when they get so overheated, right? There's like all this heat that they're generating. Like, then I would do this idea of the Chandra Badana. Or if they are, I wouldn't use this like just willy-nilly. But we can talk more about this during our December section, because that's a little bit going to be more and more about the therapeutic applications, is what my thought is, right? After you guys have kind of checked all these or have picked out some of those homework, and then we'll talk more about therapy. And then we've had the Anuloma and the Viloma Krama. I find this to be very, very, very useful. I've used this numerous times. I don't know how many times in classes, because it literally is really good at bringing awareness to their muscular actions on exhale, and then the expansion and the axial extension on inhale, and really helps with that flow of the breath. And it gets them it's a small step in the retention and suspension, because you're only like holding for 2 or 3, but because you're doing the muscular contractions, the mind doesn't have a whole lot of time to freak out, right? So I find this very useful to start helping people temper their mental fluctuations around the suspension. All right, so questions, thoughts about the chart? Was helpful, good? Sort of like a nice little, we call it sum up, right? From the whole week. All right, let me stop sharing for a moment. All right. All right. I'm going to open it up to questions. We are going to go through sort of like instruction versus teaching and sort of these modalities, but I just wanted to make sure nobody had any questions about the chanting that we did, the mantra work we did yesterday, the practice that we did yesterday, or even, any sort of confusion about the chart. Thank you, Lara. Everything organized. Now, again, please remember that the chart you know, the sort of energetic effects, those are general, okay? Because again, you know, sometimes one person has a very different reaction, or you know, because it's new, and so when everything is new, everything sort of feels Brahmana, it's stimulating, because you know, you're kind of like, there's a little bit of stress in the learning curve, right? But this is sort of the general idea, right? Of for most people, this is how the effects of those breath practices work. All right.
Anna, I have a question.
Yes, Charlotte.
I do annuloma viloma actually in with the retention and the suspension added, because that's what I was taught from my teachers.
Mhm.
And so for me, it's part of my practice every day. And I just had noticed that you didn't put it on there. Like, I know that you wouldn't want to teach that specifically. We're not going to jump in and teach something like that. But I was kind of curious, just because it's been so great for me. So I was,
Would you mind describing what that means to you, the Anuloma Viloma?
Okay, so we prep for it with cleansing, Kapala body, neti, all that. Like, I've all done all that, done asana. So then sometimes I do it at the beginning just because I just need to. But so we basically, we had to work up to it. We worked up to 20 rounds, which is the full breath. And so inhale 5, hold 10, exhale 10, inhale 5. So we don't hold for suspension.
Okay.
And then we go. So inhaling left. It's all backwards to me right now. Okay. Inhaling left for 5, hold for 10,
hold 10,
exhale right for 10, and then inhale 5.
Inhale right 5, or inhale
right 5, hold, and then exhale for 10 on the left, and that's a complete round.
Okay. So if you looked on the chart, so to me, I was taught that was called Nadi Shodhana.
Okay.
Does that make sense? That's why I want to specifically ask for, you know, if you're like, why is she asking me what I'm doing? It's because I've heard a couple different ways that people have described Anuloma and Viloma, and that's why I kind of wanted to see. So here, hold on, let me pull up the chart. I'll share it again.
And I have in our book, I don't know, I'm taught Mugs. I don't know if you know Mugs or not, but she said that, and so she had a different lineage, right? And so Nadi Shodhana, she said, was without retention at all. And then Anuloma Viloma was with the retention.
Okay. So they're sort of like,
they broke it down differently.
They broke it down a little bit differently. So in the Krishnamacharya lineage, they don't say Anuloma Viloma, they just say Nadi Shodhana, right?
Okay.
As in like both, because you're doing Shodhana means cleansing. It's from the word shuddhi, purification, and the nadis are the channels. And I guess for some reason, I don't know, because you know, with the grain and against the grain, that's what we're doing with Nadi Shodhana, right? We're kind of going, we're doing both at the same time, right? We're stimulating and soothing, right? And so if you see here in the Nadi Shodhana, we have the inhale left, right? And then you exhale right, inhale right, exhale left, and then you start, you know what I'm saying? Inhale again, you know what I'm saying? So it becomes this like thing. Okay. So, did I do this right? Yeah. So I think I might have messed that up, but I'll fix it before, I think. But yeah, so it's like a infinity symbol. Does that make sense? It feels like you're doing this,
totally,
right? Yeah. So in the lineage of Krishnamacharya, he said any one of these techniques you can put, you can use ratio.
Okay.
So your teacher's lineage is sort of like saying, okay, they're calling it something else when they're using the ratio, which is totally fine. We just have to be consistent. Does that make sense? So you can call it whatever you want, but just be consistent on how you tell your students. Does that make sense? For example, Tadasana and Samastitihi. You know what I'm saying? Like some people call Samastitihi Tadasana, but the feet are together. You know what I mean? You don't want to confuse it. If you have to figure out your lexicon, call it the consistent and same thing. But yes, so.
And if we're not doing, I can't see the chart and my brain is so full from this week. On the Nadi Shodhana that you're saying, that we're talking about, that we've done, like that you're talking about on the chart, would you do a suspension with that?
With sorry, say that again. With
Nadi Shodhana. Sorry, my dog's
yes,
drinking
of course.
water.
Yeah.
Okay,
No. Oh no. Yes.
Okay. And I have one other question.
You can use any of the ratios. Do you see what I'm saying, with any of these techniques? So, you can add suspension. So, the ratio that they're doing, that you've been doing for Viloma and Anuloma, is, basically what I think of as Nadi Shodhana. You're doing a, so you said it was inhale 5. You said inhale 10, retain 5, exhale 10, or was it 5, 10, 5? Which one was
5,
it?
10.
No, 5, 10, 10.
5, 10, 10, 5. Yeah.
And then 10.
Yes.
But no, you said there's no suspension.
No, there's no suspension.
So technically the ratio is it's a 1, 2, 2, 0 ratio. Does that make sense? So if you think of it now in the ratio, right? In each you have to delineate a number for each of the parts, 4 parts of the breath. 1, 2, 2, 0 would be the ratio you're using.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so that's if you multiply it by 5, it becomes 5, 10, 10, and then there's no suspension. You go right back to the inhale, right? So there's a 0 there. Okay. And I would consider that the Brahmana. That's a Brahmana ratio for sure. Do you see what I'm saying? That's definitely Brahmana, because there's no suspension, and we've stacked. Right, we stacked the inhale and the retention. So like that part of the sympathetic nervous system. So you can always add suspension. Do you see what I'm saying? You just change the ratio, but that's your ratio. That's what you guys are used to. Does that make sense? Yeah. But you can use a different ratio for any of these, and you can even do it in that Anuloma Viloma as well. But again, like, if you want to think about it and keep that as your, like, okay, we're doing a Brahmana ratio for this, for Anuloma Viloma, I'm going to just call it that. And then I'm doing crazy willy-nilly, whatever I want ratios, you can then call it Nadi Shodhana. Do you see what I'm saying? If you want to kind of keep it separate in your mind.
Okay.
Even though it's technically the same technique.
I know. That's why I was like, I'm so confused. And I'm
reading that, you know what I'm saying? That way you can be like, that's this lineage. Yeah.
The other question I was going to ask
worries.
is the complete breath. Like, I know they had talked about, the whatever people can call it, the yogi breath or the complete breath, and then using like Chen Mudra, Chenmaya Mudra, just for getting lung capacity for getting breath. Is that something that you ever teach or no?
So using the hand the mudras,
yeah,
right?
So
to
kind of
do
mudras.
What? To lengthen
for the complete breath, just for what would they call it? They might call it she has Vibhaga Pranayama. It's sectional breathing, essentially.
Oh, okay.
I'm too confusing. That's okay. I just was curious. That was something else that we were taught is like Chinmaya, just different types of mudras, and to actually help get in just focus on the upper, the mid, and the lower lobes of the lung. And it was just, for me, I was like, oh, that was kind of like a light bulb moment. And I was just kind of curious of your thoughts on that.
If you don't mind, like if it's like something that it was a reading, do you know what I mean? Like, if you read, you know what I mean? Like, if it's like,
I have it
to me, because I'm curious.
Can I give
because definitely
picture for you and send it to you in the email?
Yeah.
Okay, I will do that in a little while because I don't want to accidentally click on the mic while I'm sending you.
Oh, okay. Mudras are very, very, very helpful for definitely for directing attention. Do you see what I'm saying? Like mudras are really, really helpful for that, for sure. You know, is it gonna like expand someone's breath capacity because they're doing a mudra or not? Like a great amount? Probably not. Does that make sense? Like it's like, oh, I jumped from 5 to 10 because I did the mudra. Like, no. But it definitely does create a focus, you know what I mean, of attention. And it creates energy lines in the body. Do you see what I'm saying? And there's
I thought it was crazy when
marma points and whatnot that are all in here, and these are all, and I mean, it definitely has an effect. I mean, yes, for sure. Mudras are very, very powerful. I should find, there's a video on YouTube. It's like just the beginning of like this lecture that my teacher Douglas was talking, and he does these, you can chant and do these like mudra where like the mudras are like it's so fast the way he does it, if that makes sense. Like it's like, it almost looks like gymnastics for like the hand, you know. And it's like and you're like, oh my, and I'm all like twisted up, but like there's a mantra for each of these, and it's like, oh, so it's like the Ganesha mantra and and it's like my little stubby fingers, I'm like, but it's really, really, really cool, you know, to kind of see all of those practices happening at the same time, where it's like, wow, they're chanting, they're doing the thing, and it's like we're so used to everything being pieced apart, you know what I mean? In the US.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Charlotte. Yeah, please send it to me, and I'll look at that. All right. Yeah, check that chart. I think I did. Yeah, it should I think it's okay. Anyway, all right. Yeah, and the mantra and the mudras with Shivakami, guys, if you guys haven't watched that, on the learning lab, I think it is. That's what we call that Google sheet is called. Definitely check it out. It's really kind of cool and fun. All right, so we had the chart. Showed that. Okay. Other questions, comments, thoughts about the chart?
Anna Pilar, I put this in the chat, but I think it got absorbed.
Yeah, I'm trying to like see it all.
Is there, do you have a reference that you recommend just in general for learning or finding more of the mantras and a book that has them?
Yes.
Website.
Okay, I'm gonna grab my book. Hold on, a couple books. Hold on. All right. So, all right, here we go. It was like, no. Yeah, IPI. I don't usually teach Chandra or Surya Bhadana, you know, to the general public usually, like, unless like prenatal for, I use Chandra during prenatal, but you know, it's just, here's the thing, like you never know if someone has a deviated septum, but I don't know. I find it to be very, very, it's very intense. It's piercing. So it can be a little intense, and unlike, you know what I mean, where we're doing sort of alternate. But yeah, so, but we'll talk about that in December. And again, like, you know, experiment with it, of course. This is just, you know, always take whatever I say with a grain of salt. All right, so mantra stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna give a little sort of caveat here, all right? So please, this book is by Dr. David Frawley, okay? He helped, I think, found the Ayurvedic Institute, or at least taught in it, him and Robert Svoboda and Dr. Ladd for a very long time in New Mexico. You know, he is beloved in India, but I do have to say, like, he's sort of, he's like really, he definitely has gone to the like the sort of nationalist party of that of India, where he's like, you know, not necessarily with the academic where it's like, hey, the Vedas are from India or not, you know what I mean? So just know that there's a little bit of weird political stuff happening, whatever. However, he's also very, very knowledgeable. They consider him in India, I believe they gave him like some sort of award or whatnot. They think they consider him like a reincarnation of one of the rishis. Do you see what I'm saying? And again, I think his history is like he grew up in like Colorado or something. And like his brothers are like either a firefighter or a cop or something like, and he just like literally is a Sanskrit, like Ayurvedic, you know, it's just definitely, you know, kind of crazy to think of where he grew up at that time period, and all of a sudden, like, you know what I'm saying, like fish out of water kind of thing. But this is the book he has. It's called Mantra, Yoga, and Primal Sound. He has a lot of books, just FYI, okay? And it's Dr. Frawley. And I'll write in the chant. But this one in particular, it has like a ton of information. If you want to nerd out, like nerd out. It has stuff on Sanskrit. It has bija mantras, what they mean. Like it is crazy pants. So in Nyasa, so mantras and marma points, what to do for the like, you know, top of the head, for your left arm, like, you know what I mean? Like what? It's really, 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 it's very comprehensive, just FYI. It is great. He knows his stuff, okay, for sure. He has stuff among all the gods, you know what I mean, like little sort of like information about all the gods. So this is a great resource, you know, and it has like, you know, it talks about, it gives you the mantras. It doesn't give you, when you're looking at like the mantras, it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't tell you how to, like in that thing, like it has all the diacritical marks, so it's not telling you like how to pronounce it while you're in there, but he gives you all of the Sanskrit at the beginning on how you should pronounce it. So it's sort of separate, if that makes sense. So it's like he wants you to learn how to pronounce the vowels and all that in this one section, and then you apply it to the mantra. He's not making it easy. Does that make sense? Kind of like the way Kamenoff's book, it says it has like the way you kind of pronounce it underneath the Sanskrit, right? So it's like Uttanasana. He doesn't do that. But it's a very, 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 very good book. The other one I have to say, and I always plug this book because I love this book. I think it's filled with amazing stories. This is by Sally Campton. I absolutely adore her. And she has lots of mantras in here. And she does sort of sound them out. But this is the Awakening Shakti, okay, book. So if you're looking for more sort of feminine goddess stories, but also the mantras that go with that, she has meditations in this as well. So, you know, how to connect and contemplate Durga, you know, Lakshmi, or, you know, whoever, Saraswati, all these beautiful, like, and then, you know, my friend Ekabumi Alec, he did the illustrations. So here, let me kind of find a really cool one. Let me find the one of Kali. That's always a good one. Kali's a fun one. So you can kind of see Kali. And then, like, you know, there's like Parvati, or here's Ardhanarishvara. This is his version of the Ardhanarishvara. Remember we talked, look at the half man, half woman, right? Shiva and Shakti. And so, yeah. So, oh, Saraswati. So Saraswati, when we're looking at mantra, Saraswati here, she is the goddess of mantra, okay? Her aspect of Vach. Vach is you know, means sound, okay? It's like, it's, you know, the emanation of the vibration. And this Veena, so the Veena, that big long sort of, you know, musical instrument, string instrument, they talk about how it's supposed to be. It represents, when she's playing, it literally represents your spine, right? And so she is playing you into existence, right? With the vibration, like literally, she is playing you into existence. Because so all of these gods and goddesses have consort, or they're kind of like linked. So Brahma, who is the creator, he's the one that dreams up, right, the worlds, but he can't do anything. He just thinks of them. It is Saraswati, the Shakti, right? That's what creates the Prakritic world. That Shakti is Saraswati. And then she plays those things into existence on the Veena. So that's what's kind of really cool. So you've got, the Brahma who's thinking, but it's actually Saraswati who's, creating the manifestation, having it come alive through vibration. So anyway, these are the two books I really, really, really liked. Oh yeah, started a yoga bookshelf. Oh, Malik, I tell you. There's so many so many books. Sometimes I just have to purge, and it's like, and then I end up rebuying them later. I'm like, oh no. Although I never purge the ones that I get signed. So I've been lucky enough that I've gotten to I have signed books. I've been lucky enough to study with a lot of these people, and I always make sure that I always be all nerdy and have them sign my books, because that's kind of a weird thing I do. But yeah, so those are some of the ones I would say for mantras. Yoga Glow, which is one of those online, you know what I mean, yoga kind of class things. She's got there are lectures from Sally Kempton there. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's $22 a month. So if you don't want to do that, never mind. But I believe you might be able to. You might find some stuff on YouTube, and I think she has her own website. But definitely, she's got a lot of stuff on Yoga Glow, and actually, so does my teacher Douglas. He's got, if you want to learn stories, those Sanskrits, not the Sanskrits, right? The Tamil stories, the weird ones that I teach. He has some of those actually on Yoga Glow as well. So if you're interested in more of sort of the philosophy, both him and Dr. Douglas Brooks and Sally Kempton are both on Yoga Glow, and they're kind of there's no asana involved. With Douglas, for sure, it's just lecture. With Sally, it's storytelling, so sort of lecture, storytelling, and then some meditations she does. But those are always good resources.
Dr. Douglas, what was his last?
Brooks. Here, I'll write in the chat. That's my teacher for philosophy and Sanskrit. He's got his PhD from Harvard, and he lived in India and traveled in India for a very long period of time with his teacher, and then he teaches comparative religions and Sanskrit at the University of Rochester in upstate New York. So if you're in the East Coast area, but he also has, yeah, neither am I. But he does have a website called rajanika.com that you can, he does have some lectures on specific gods and goddesses. And he also has some academic ones where they're $600, which is okay, even I can't afford that. But he'll have $20-something or $50, he'll have 6 hours of a story and philosophy on Hanuman, you know what I mean, or Ganesha. So it's always a fun resource if you're interested in the mythology and philosophy. Yeah, so if you want to kind of do that. Let's see, anything else? All right, other questions, thoughts? So thank you, Malik. Ramaswamy, Srivatsa Ramaswamy has a YouTube channel. Cool. He has one of the, I like his chanting of the Gayatri as well. And yes, for sutras. I'm going to show you something else. Let me find it. Sorry. There is a, where is it? She is a, And this is like way old school, but I'm sure she has something else. Oh well. I had a CD case, but I'll just I'm sure she's upgraded it because who has CDs anymore? Her name is Sonia Nelson. Let me type it in the chat. I think it's Nelson, like that. Let me just check. She is incredible. I believe she lives in New Mexico. And she teaches the traditional way of teaching the sutras with the call and response. Here, I can find her website. And where like in the CD, yeah, here it is. She would chant and then wait and pause and have you try to say it twice, and then she does the whole thing. All right, here we go. Here she's the Vedic Chant Center. I'm gonna put it in the chat. She is, and then her pronunciation is impeccable. I think she's much older now, maybe 70s now. I'm not sure. She does, but she's got a lot of good students and like other teachers underneath her now. But she tends only to teach like the kind of more advanced stuff. But her stuff is amazing. So I had her CD. I'm sure now you can do it as an MP3. I'm sure they've totally revamped it. But she's so good, okay, that Gary sent his girlfriend Minx to, when she wanted to do sutras. It's hard to teach your significant other. Do you know what I mean? Like it's hard because there's a different power dynamic, right? So she wanted to do the sutras and chant them, be able to chant them, right? So you could do the full first pada and then full, second, to learn to do that like Gary does. So he sent her to Sonia. So to me, that's like, whoa, if he's sending his, beloved to her, and her stuff, of course, I've known about her for decades, but like the fact that he sent Minx there, I was like, okay, you know what I mean? Like she's, because he's a bit of a perfectionist, to be perfectly honest. My teacher is. Anyway, so Sonia Nelson is awesome. So if you want to learn about sutra chanting, definitely check her out. Okay, and there's like a little shop and resources for that. So if you wanted to do that. All right, other questions. All right, so let me so final questions, thoughts, about, mantra or Gayatri or any of the anything that's on the chart, because I'm going to start talking now about how to teach this. It's like the methodology. Let's switch gears. I just want to make sure we're all, yes, on the same page. Okay, good. Okay, so instruction versus teaching. So, instruction is just sort of like do what I say or do what I do, right? But teaching actually should always awaken the students' motivation and ability to do it in their own practice, right? So that's the difference between an instructor and a teacher, okay? And so we want to, not just, so, it happens with assist and asana, happens, you don't just want to like you want to teach them why they're doing it, get them inspired and get them curious, you know what I'm saying? And not just, not just instruct. So when we think about the way of teaching, number one, it's always, we kind of do it from a couple different perspectives. So auditory for sure, so by like language, and then demonstration, because people are visual learners, are as well. And then before COVID, we would also use touch, right? Now it's a little bit different. So how do we do touch for pranayama? Well, you're not going to sit there and put your hands on their nose, like don't have that out, but you could bring their attention, their awareness to the the space between their shoulder blades, having them breathe into that space. Areas like up here, even side ribs, as long as fingers are pointing away, right, toward, not in. Those types of things is very helpful for people who are more kinesthetic, when you're like, we want you to expand the entire, thoracic cavity, all of your ribs. So that can be very, very useful. But again, we're not doing that anymore at the moment. And again, but the priority is always using language first and touch last, right? So trying to get them first to do it by how you are speaking. So sometimes that means having to have a few different kind of ways of saying the same thing. So, understanding who your student base is and prime them for it. So we're not just, like jumping in, like you're going to prime them for it. And so you're going to explain the benefits, like why are we doing this? What are the anatomical benefits of practicing in this way? What are the physiological benefits of practicing this way? What are the energetic benefits, of practicing in this way? And then, even some of the more sort of, you can even touch, if it's appropriate for your student base, some of the more esoteric and subtle results or effects, as sort of like a doorway into spirit, right? Into the awareness of something bigger, right? Than just you or what's around that you see, right? And so, as we, and so as you sort of explain that stuff, obviously, you want to have in your mind, when you're going to teach this, like what are the specific breath adaptations that you're going to do in asana that's going to support the pranayama practice that you picked. Teaching them how to move their awareness into that directional flow of the breath and in towards the central channel, right? So again, the classic Krishnamacharya teaching of, and Desikachar teaching of, the chest to belly, inhale, and belly to chest, exhale, right? So the awareness of the expansion from the top down, and then on the exhale, engaging those abdominals and moving the awareness and the breath up and out. And then, really understanding what what they're like, and kind of seeing what the threshold, what you think their capacity might be. And just by, as you're working with the breath centered asana, if people are struggling to do a 6 count inhale or exhale, you're not going to be doing anything that's like, 10-5, 10-5, or what I'm saying when it comes to the ratio. So understanding their, like reading the capacity as well as then adjusting the ratio, or having an idea of what kind of ratio. Is it also Brahmana or Langana, and how big of the threshold is it? And then what technique you want to use. So is it going to be, nostril stuff? Is it going to be krama? Is it going to be, a mouth, like tongue shitali? And again, just having a very clear understanding of what you're going to be teaching and how you're going to be teaching. Matching the pranayama to the context of the class, obviously. So again, this is part of knowing your audience. Brahmana more than likely in the morning, Langana in the evening. Again, if you have a very specific audience, like here in Austin, before COVID, for example, I had friends that would teach in some of the 6th Street bars. You know what I mean? And that sounds very bizarre and odd. But before the bar would open, or you know what I mean, like, or they would have a group of students that worked at bars, but they would come to the morning class that they held. And so, knowing that specific group, like you're not necessarily going to do Brahmana in the morning if they just have gotten off at 3, you know what I'm saying? And they're here for a 5 a.m. class, like, for them, that specific And it wasn't like just all like anybody, but that specific group that she taught, like they're going to do long enough to get them to sleep, you know? So you can always vary it a little bit, but that's more about knowing the context and knowing your audience, right? And then, you know, so as in this sort of stepwise approach while you're in it, while you're there, right, while you're starting, this idea of, you know, explain to the students that there are different ways to control the flow of the breath, right, and the effects and why they should explore them, but also like, you know, help them guide their attention. Don't just be like, inhale and then exhale, like inhale and like literally direct, like notice the expansion across the collarbones, feel the ribs lift, like give them, you know, actual benchmarks for them to kind of find in their body, is there, because it's an embodied, you know, experience. So, you know, the control, or at least the awareness of what's happening in the respiratory musculature, right? And then even specific muscular actions like drawing the navel in or lifting up from the pelvic floor, you know what I'm saying? Things specific. So give them some specific muscular action cues. And I tend to do that like more heavy at the beginning. And then I might let them just sort of experience it a little bit. And then towards, you know, I'd say 3/4 of, let's say if we're doing like 10 rounds, like 3/4 of the way of the rounds, reminding them, do you see what I'm saying? A little bit like, you know, just sort of, again, bringing the attention, you know, as you find that your exhale is lengthening, still continue to lift the pelvic floor, draw that navel in to press all the air out. Just little reminders that they're still doing that musculature, right? So it's not just all of a sudden silent and everyone's wondering what's happening. When teaching on exhale, again, in the breath-centered asana, I always remind people to engage their belly during exhale, even in asana, and that's a good habit to have, right? Because it's a good habit for them to engage that if they're moving through space, but then it also becomes a habit, which is great for when they're doing just a seated pranayama that they're already comfortable and aware of. As they exhale, they immediately start to draw the abdominals in. So, you know, if you haven't already introduced that in asana, definitely introduce that when they're seated for pranayama. But I would definitely, if possible, start to make sure that your language starts to support that awareness of muscular action already in asana before even pranayama. I know it was a very long and convoluted sentence, but hopefully that was you all understood that. And, you know, this is why I found krama, viloma krama viloma krama so, the krama exhale so, not easy, useful, because they're learning, and you're teaching them how to differentiate the musculature of the abdominals of what's below the navel and what's above the navel, right? And so they're getting a much more, and you know, when we think of abdominals, a lot of times everyone just thinks of the, like, you know, the sort of flashy ones that are the ones that are at the very top here, the top, the very front of the body, right? Those the, you know, the 4-pack or the 6-pack or the 8-pack, right? You know, blah, blah, blah. But you know, those really, they're just kind of fancy. They don't get engaged unless you're like hunching over. A lot of your strength is actually in those in the deeper transverse muscles, right? Like and so you should be becoming more and more glamour muscles. Yes, they are the glamour muscles. But like, you know, those are just kind of flashy, but you know, those deeper muscles are the ones that are keeping you upright. They're the ones that are protecting your back, like, you know, all that stuff. So that awareness of those deeper layers, I think, is important, for sure. And then again, you know, I always introduce the like pubic bone to navel to sternum type of deal, and then the pelvic floor afterwards as they kind of get used, because it starts to happen regardless. But, you know, the pelvic floor ones, you have to kind of do a little more exploration when it's like, you know, you tilt your pelvis forward, you know, sort of engage with the muscles that stop the pee. And then if you tilt the pelvis back, squeeze the anus. And then it's like the sort of exploratory of finding like how to lift between those two extremes, right? So like between Vajrayana and Ashwini mudras. But definitely first get them familiar with just the abdominals first. And then, you know, when we are looking at Krama inhale, right, the segmented inhale, you know, introducing how to expand the chest on inhale while keeping the belly firm at first. To really find this expansion, and then releasing the belly as the breath, as you can find your awareness as it moves down, right? And so, you know, exploring that idea of the as the chest expands and the ribs expand, then we start to slowly release the belly and then start to draw the belly in on the exhale, right? So I think those are very kind of useful ways to teach muscular action with attention that will support breath. I think I honestly will introduce Krama exhale first, and then I would introduce Krama inhale. I would not mix the two. I would not put the two together. So that's a little too much. So like doing Krama inhale and doing a Krama exhale right after, you know what I mean? It's like, just let if you're segmenting one part of the breath, let the opposite be free, and not like overload. Okay. And then when you're teaching, you know, always remind the students to not force the breath, right? You know, not struggle, not force, not cap. You know, to when they're in asana, to remain attuned to the breath and how it sounds. You know, and that they're not holding it or bearing down. You know what I mean? When they're doing that, and that the flow of the breath should be just like, you know, because I'm sure as we talk about asana, we talk about sukha and sthira, right? These ideas of stability and ease. And, you know, it's the same thing applies to the breath, right? There should be a stability of the breath and an ease. It shouldn't be jagged or rough, you know, again, as although I do know that does happen. Thank you, Vienna. Like we're talking about, you know, the neurodiverse, but, you know, when you're looking at general population, we want to keep that breath flowing and ease. There's a sense of sukha in there, right? And again, reminding them that, you know, we want to make sure the exhale is equal or longer than the inhale, and that the exhale is equal or longer than the retention. And always that sort of smooth flow of inhale and exhale, even through those pauses, that there's none of these gasping after the pauses or a bearing down or a release before you have to exhale. So, you know, reminding them to keeping the throat open and relaxed during these pauses. Questions about anything so far? Okay. So when we look at sequencing asana, all right, in service to pranayama, all right, you know, you're kind of changing your sort of view on peak poses, if that makes sense, right? So you'll still have peak poses, of course, but the point of the practice is not necessarily that pose, right? The point of the practice is to get the body prepared for the pranayama. So technically the pranayama is the peak experience. But as you sequence then, you think about how you adapt the breath, right? So is this going to be a brahmana or a langana or a samana energy of pranayama? So then what then do I like, so then what that then that will delineate and sort of filter what types of postures, right, that you're going to use when it comes to sort of spinal action. Was it back bends or forward bends or twists, laterals, right, and axial extension. How intense of the practice of asana you want it to be. So, you know, maybe if we are going to be working on Nadi Shodhana or Pratiloma Ujjayi, maybe we don't want to do a bunch of arm balances, right? And putting a bunch of weight on the shoulders, the neck, the arms, and the wrists, if then we're going to need to hold ourselves. Does that make, you know what I mean? And do something like this. So just thinking in those sort of ways, in those sort of perspectives, right? Also, you know, looking at that sequence and knowing where and when we're going to be playing with maybe the breath in these postures. So, you know, where are we going to be lengthening the inhale or having them, you know, actively, consciously lengthen and exhale, or lengthen the exhale, depending on if it's a brahmana or a langana. Or if it's samana, when we do that, like half the class, half the first half we're doing this, second half we're doing that. So we'd switch it. When maybe we introduce retention, maybe when we're going to introduce suspension. And again, picking postures that when we are doing this active, let's say, lengthening of the breath, that these postures, number one, can be used dynamically, but also are familiar enough that they won't, that the student can focus on the breath while they're doing them versus having to, you know, work on balance or whatnot, you know what I mean? Or like a bind, you know, all the other stuff. We don't want to distract them from the progression of the breath, right? So if you notice when we would do the sequences this week, they weren't fancy poses, right? It wasn't like crow or Ekapada Galvanasana, like a one-legged like flying crow or some sort of, you know, bird of paradise, or, you know what I'm saying? We didn't use postures like that. If you notice, we used very, very, like the hardest posture I think we did is some of the variations of Warrior One, right? That was like the most challenging. And maybe Utkatasana, you know what I'm saying, yesterday, maybe that, you know, the day before. But, you know, on the whole, we used very, very familiar, simple postures. And when we did them, you know, if we use, like, we would specifically use certain types of appendicular skeletal system, so like limb variations, right, that would also then help either open up areas or, you know, work on expanding certain areas in service of then breathing. Yeah, samana is balanced. So for example, Nadi Shodhana is considered samana, it's balancing. Pratiloma Ujjayi is considered samana, balancing. Ratios like 1-1-1-1, 1-0-1-0, or 2-1-2-1, those are considered samana ratios. Samavriti, sama is balanced. You know, I've heard, it's interesting, I've heard different takes on some of these postures. So for example, headstand is considered brahmana. And so is handstand, but I've also heard of headstand being considered langana. So it kind of depends on how adept you are in headstand, right? Like, is headstand easy or not for you? And that's going to determine if it's Langana or Brahmana. And, you know, something like headstand is very complicated because the ratio of arm length, right, to neck, like I need a hole in the floor for me to have an easy headstand, right? But some people, they need like their arm is so tall, they need extra padding. But the people who have that, you know, perfect little ratio, they're like, this is definitely, you know, easy. And so it becomes a Langana practice. But I've heard the same thing kind of talked about with shoulder stand, but I have to say with shoulder stand, in my experience, and it doesn't have to be even the full shoulder stand, it could be Viparita Karani, which is like candlestick, or it could be supported legs up the wall. I find Salamba Sharvangasana and the variations of that, so shoulder stand, to be much more samana in nature than Brahmana or Langana. Because if I'm tired and I put my legs up the wall, I feel nourished and energized. Not like, you know, hyperactive, but I feel, you know, oh, I feel like I'm a little bit more awake and have more clarity. And I've also noticed if, for example, if, you know, I had 3 boys. So like if sometimes when they're like blah, buzzing, my oldest, who's the natural yogi, he will come and lay on the couch, but he'll lay upside down on the couch. Like his legs are up over the back and he's sort of like flopped, and then he'll calm down. And so it balanced them from the Brahmana and made it more Langana for him. So he became more Samana. So I find shoulder stand to be very interesting in its variations of whether or not if it's energetically Brahmana or Langana. And my argument has always been, I've always found it to be very Samana, right? So it kind of puts you back into the midline. But when we look at breath, definitely stuff that's working the right and left side of the brain at the same time is going to be samana. So nadi shodhana, pratiloma, ujjayi. But if you use anuloma and viloma ujjayi one after the other, that also then creates a samana effect, right? Because one was brahmana and one was samana, and if you bring them together, it becomes samana. So from brahmana to langana. All right, but what was I saying before? Okay, so, you know, picking, so deciding like, okay, you know, these postures that you're picking, you know, you can do, you know, I would say you can do some very nice lengthened inhale and exhale in something like a supported legs up the wall posture for sure. I wouldn't do it necessarily in like headstand or a full shoulder stand that hasn't support, because you want to kind of find the focus on the breath versus the balance, right? And then, you know, oh, I see the topic here. Yes. If someone doesn't mind emailing Tanya the PDF, that'd be really helpful. Thank you, ladies and gents. And then also you can also use sound, you know, to lengthen exhales. So it doesn't have to be mantra. It could be hissing. It can be, you know, vocalizing like ooh or oh, you know what I mean? Or even, you know, things like that. Ma. I used the ma when I would teach or sub prenatal classes. That's always a nice one. But you know, you can kind of use sound to do that, to do the lengthened exhale. And then, you know, when teaching, so when teaching how to lengthen a breath in asana, you know, keeping the patterns sort of even in a way is very helpful for the mind. So, you know, inhaling or exhaling 4 counts, and then 6, and then 8, or doing something like 3 and then 5, you know what I mean, can work as well. But, you know, sometimes odd numbers jar the mind. If it's, I think most people find even numbers easier. But then with the retention and suspension, keeping it not jumping like you do, or you know, you do with inhale and exhale. So 2, 3, 4 is a lot better to get people to get comfortable and learn retention and suspension.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
It's Lara. So
Hi,
I
Laura.
remember, hi, sorry if I sound a little congested. I'm sick in bed today, but I'm still here.
Well, thank you for jumping in anyway.
Oh,
I
this is
appreciate you.
lovely. Maybe someday I'll like do a hologram if we have to do in-person training and I'm sick. So I remember Michelle speaking about Brahmana and Langana in relation to asana, and she had mentioned that that extension is typically Brahmana and Langana is typically flexion. So for instance, in cat cow, like inhaling into cat would be like a Langana effect. So is that all like
Cow.
true?
Cow.
Cow.
Cow. So
Or
yeah, cow would be Brahmana. Cat is this one. There would be Langana. Yes.
So if we flipped
um,
it would be the opposite. Like if we
what we
instead of it, so like typically like
oh,
I in a normal class I'll like inhale for cow, exhale for cat. But if I wanted to do like a Langana practice, then I would do the opposite of that.
No. Keep it the same. So, all right. So let me talk a little bit about the energetics in Brahmanas. All right, energetics in the asana. Thank you, Laura, for bringing this up. This is good. Okay. So, certain, at least in my lineage, again, I'm always saying from this, what I've learned from Gary is there's energetic effects that are inherent in certain spinal actions, right? So for example, back bends, which is extension, all right, tend to be Brahmana in effect, energizing, stimulating, nourishing. And then, so that would be back bends and laterals. Okay, so extension and what they call lateral flexion. Don't let the word flexion in that particular way that derail you. Just think laterals, which is lateral flexion. Okay, that's side bending. So those are what they're considered Brahmana. If you think about that, it's because it's very, very conducive to inhale, right? So when we are doing a back bend or a lateral, there is an ability to allow the thoracic cavity to expand, okay? Which then allows for greater lung capacity, right? The lungs have more space to breathe. Because you can have beautiful pink little lungs that, because you've never smoked a day in your life and you've never, you've worn masks your whole time when you're outside, so you're never going to be getting any sort of gram. You have pink, healthy little lungs since the day, like you were born. But if you are literally like this all day tight and all these intercostal muscles are tight and everything's tight, you're not going to have a very big, long, deep breath because there's nowhere for those beautiful pink little lungs to go. Do you see what I'm saying? So as we get this musculature able to expand, right, into its full capacity for your structure, that immediately allows the lungs, space to be able to fill, okay? And again, this is so important because if you, and I remember, this is so bizarre, I know this is gonna sound like a weird tangent, but do you guys ever remember hearing about the Elephant Man back in like the 1800s, right? He was like he was, I think, on a sideshow for a long time. Okay, you know how he died? He suffocated. And so how did he suffocate? Well, his condition was that his musculature ended up becoming bone in a lot of ways. Does that make sense? So his muscles turned into bone. His body, and this can happen, okay? Like he had a special disease, but I tell a story about my good friend Mark Uredell here. He's an incredible yoga teacher and has a PhD in PT. He's a physical therapist, and he's been doing PT as a career for like 25, 30 years. There was a man that would come to get his hamstrings massaged because he was a runner, and he was so type A. He would hurt himself, right? Like damage himself from running, and he would come in and get massage and whatnot. And he kept tearing his hamstring at this certain spot. And it was like, not quite a meat of the muscle, but it was up towards where the like the tendon started, right? So it's like sort of the area between where the muscle turns to tendon to get to the, and it's like he would always tear it in a certain area. And at some point, he came back to Mark and was like, I have this weird feeling here, this sort of weird knob. And so Mark was as a PT and massage therapist, he's massaging, and he's like, oh my gosh. So what happened was this guy had kept repeatedly damaging this one section of his hamstring to the point where scar tissue had formed, but obviously it wasn't enough. Okay. So the body was like, well, I guess we're just going to put bone here. And the body literally started creating bone to try to stabilize this connection between the muscle and the tendon. Does that make sense? As the muscle was moving this. So like your body can do that. Like your body can be like, that's it. Like so unfortunately the poor elephant man, his body's condition was, it literally started to, it was changing his muscles into bone. And so literally he suffocated because his intercostal muscles became bone and he could not expand his rib cage to breathe anymore. Does that see? So if we don't create this ability to expand and contract, this spanda, like that's what creates this life, right? This is how prana moves and flows. So when we look at the energetic effect of these asanas, it's like what is conducive to expanding the thoracic cavity is going to be what's going to be brahmana, right? It's going to be for inhale. When we think of, everyone's like, don't turn to bone. But when we look at what is conducive for exhale, and then we're looking at not just the passive recoil of a normal exhale, but when we think of in yoga, when we exhale, we draw the navel in, right? So what are the postures that literally allow and connect us deeper, right, to that abdominal contraction? And that's forward fold, so that's flexion, and rotation, which are twists, okay? So those are going to be langana in energy, okay? Now, we want to kind of stop thinking of heating and cooling for a moment because langana and brahmana don't necessarily care about what's hot and what's not, okay? Because, somebody mentioned Mark here, don't they know him? Yeah. Mark also does a really good kirtan. And he has this, yeah. Anyway, so thanks, Viana. Back to memory lane. But when we look at, so in langana, when we're doing, for example, a twist, like what we were doing the other day when we did the Pavriti Prasrita Padottanasana, so the revolved wide-legged forward fold, right, on exhale, and we moved the arm too, and then we also did some work where we suspended and held. You might feel that there is like, that there was like some heat happening, some sweat, right? Because it's hard, it's effort, but it's a different feeling of energy than it is when it's like the inhale expansion heat. So that type of langana heat, shall we say, is what we call purification. So that's why langana, the root word is lagu, L-A-G-H-U, lagu in Sanskrit. Lagu, it means to lighten. So it's, think about when you're looking at that, it's not about light as in what you like, what allows you to see, but light as in that it's lessening, right? So evaporating, right? Like there's less is going to be left. And so, I have here Tiffany saying flexion and twist are used so much in restorative. I would say they're used probably a lot more in yin, if you notice, that's for sure. But yes, restorative definitely has a lot of that. But also, if you look at the restorative, you have wonderful back bends, and they're brahmana, but they're not heating. You see what I'm saying? So they're nourishing. You know what I mean? And so you're supported, and so you don't have to use that muscular energy, right? It creates heat, but it's still very nourishing in nature because it's brahmana, right? It's allowing us to find that full inhale, right?
Yes.
And then so when we want to do a langana practice, Laura, it's not that we want to reverse the breathing in those postures, although, and this is okay, guys, just remember, Don't be confused. Anything that you naturally do on exhale, you're going to keep doing on exhale. So that means forward bends and twists, okay? Trying to forward bend on an inhale does not feel right. I don't know if anybody's tried that. It doesn't feel good. It feels bizarre and odd. So anything you normally do on exhale, stay doing on exhale. However, you can, and you do stuff that you normally do on inhale, on exhale. So you can do back bends and laterals on exhale. You know, so think about when you come into some of these big back bends, like a camel, you usually come on exhale to kind of get those abdominals engaged to help, you know, lead you gently into that against gravity. The same thing with triangle. Most people exhale into triangle. Although technically those are back bends and laterals, yes, you can do them on inhale, but these larger ones, we do them on exhale too. So back bends and laterals can also be done on exhale. So what I would suggest is that instead of, you don't reverse things, instead you just create more focus on the contraction on the exhale. So if I'm doing cat-cow, I would, you know, inhale, allow the chest to lift, and then exhale, draw the navel in, gently press down through those hands, broaden them apart, feel that expansion, and you know, just kind of work more on the attention on the exhale and the flexion portion, if it's something like a cat-cow that requires both. And you can even create, you could also make something like Virabhadrasana 1 more Langana in effect, not like fully, but a little bit, by not having the arms raised up, right? By having the arms more in the back, or keeping them on the hips, or keeping the hands, you know what I mean, maybe at the heart, and turning the head down, and then focusing, you know, saying inhale, find your length through the spine, but exhale, draw the navel in, connect down to the feet, ground through the four corners of the feet, engage the legs. Like the more you then focus on that part of the breath in that pose, it's going to lessen the Brahmana effect. Does everybody get that? Or at least start to think about that, kind of connect and notice that. Yeah. So I hope that helps. Thank you. Yeah. So I hope that helps a little bit, Laura. I see that. Yeah. That you don't you know, or you know, so what I do a lot of this in when I do flows, when I teach flow classes, I'll have people come up to that like high lunge crescent, you know what I mean? It's sort of like a Vera 1 variation, right? Just the back heel's not on the floor, it's lifted, but the hips are even. I use it a lot if somebody has sacral instability, because it doesn't torque the back leg, so it keeps the heel up, but that also contains the pelvis and keeps the sacrum a little bit more happy. But it's more work, which is, you know, fine. What I will have them start on the lunge, right, with their hands, fingertips only, load the legs with the weight, and then have them exhale and stay in that position, but just move the arms back. So again, we're loading on the legs, and then stay there as their inhale. So there's sort of a speed racer, and then come up on the exhale into that crescent. So that creates, number one, more stability, obviously, because they're moving with the stability and engagement of the abdominals. But it's, you know, so it's a much more grounding effect for that, and there's less wobble. That's also a much more Langana in effect if you're coming up on the exhale. Okay. Yes, intention is very big. Oh, all right, Eva. I don't know why you can't raise your hand, but yes, you can definitely ask a question.
Option disappeared from my screen, and I don't know where it is. Anyway, okay, so this is a little, I guess it's on topic, but I'm like applying this stuff. I've been working on putting the yoga into the singing and my teaching and all of that. And one of the things I have kind of found in my own practice is, you know, if I'm having trouble with some really high, super long thing, I do one of two things: forward fold or twist. So what you were just explaining about, you know, with using the forward fold and the twist, is that because I'm releasing my abdominals, the tension, when I do those two things, right? And allowing my body to exhale, you know, maybe I was gripping or something, and then now suddenly I'm in a twist, I'm not gripping my abdominals anymore, and these super long passages are incredibly easy.
Right. For some reason,
I'm
I think my
trying to figure
connection's
out
a
what's
little
going
off.
on. Yeah.
Can you repeat that first portion?
Okay, so say I've
That you
got
mentioned.
some like stratospheric opera thing, and I'm way up high, and
Okay,
it's super duper
okay.
long. So it's a super high pressure, super intense.
A lot of pressure in the thoracic.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly. And then
Okay.
if
Oh,
I
that's good.
just either go into a forward fold and maybe raising, while I'm singing, or just simply, sit in a twist, suddenly, I can sing forever, and it's super duper easy. And, what you were just saying about using twists with the, to prep for pranayama, right? Or using pranayama and twist. That's where I'm trying to lay those things on top of each other in my understanding. Does that make sense?
Well, I think Viana has a good chat here. She said forward folds and twists increase vagal tone. Yep. And yes, I would say that when we're doing the forward folds and twists, and that muscular action helps tone the diaphragm. You know what I'm saying? So it's helping. So as you exhale, you know what I mean? Think about when we did the Uddiyana Bandha, how it's like, whoop, right? So it's what it's definitely going to increase projection.
Well, that's not the issue.
Lengthening the exhale.
Extraordinarily loud, and in my abdominal, it actually my diaphragm tends to be too gripped. I actually sing better when I lay on a ball for a while up under my and here to kind of actually let that go. I'm too gripped up so that I can access the rest of my pelvis, right? So I don't know. You were saying something, and I was trying to scribble things down about using the twists and forward fold in prep for pranayama.
Yes.
Okay. Can you
for lengthened exhales? Yes, and suspension.
In suspension.
Because when you lengthen, when you lengthen the exhale as you're moving in space on a forward fold or a twist, you're taxing the system. You're putting the system into more stress. Do you see what I'm saying? And as you move, especially if you're, and again, this is always, you have to be moving.
Uh-oh. She frozen for anybody else?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Eva, were you saying that you then sing the passage as you're standing up?
Sometimes I'll just hang there.
Mm-hmm.
And then other times, like I'll hang there for a minute. And then after I've been able to do it, hanging there like that, I will start to rise up and try to bring that sensation with me, because eventually I can't sing, leaning over like that, right? I'm not going to perform like that. So I've got to figure out how to get that coordination in my body without falling over. So I just kind of not folding. So I bring myself gradually to standing, trying to find that same coordination in my body when I'm not actually doing it, right? I'm just kind of memorize the sensation. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I just work gradually back to an upright position, and then see if I can do it without folding at all, and just kind of visualizing the fold, feeling that energetic engagement in my body. Does that help?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is a whole nother topic. I'm sorry. I was just trying to understand how what she was saying applied to what I was already kind of doing intuitively.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm trying to help you put them together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, hey guys, I'm back again.
Oh,
Sorry
yay.
about that. But Vienna, thank you for jumping in. Sorry, for some reason I put myself on the Bluetooth, on my cell hotspot now, because I'm just tired of being kicked off when my kids get on. You also mentioned that you could start when you're in your forward fold and you would start singing. You're upside down, right? You're in your forward fold and singing too.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what's interesting? I remember randomly, and again, I'm not a singer, okay? So I don't, this is like new territory for me. But here's the one thing I remember, and Vienna, you might be able to help him more, but do you guys remember the singer Pink? Right?
Yes.
Okay. Her show, she does stuff that's like aerial acrobatic stuff, like aerial type of like silk work and yoga. She sings, she mentioned this in an interview that like at first it was an interesting thing with trying to sing upside down, but then all of a sudden she sings stronger and louder and better when she's upside down than when she's upright. So there's something about the way gravity is moving through and with the diaphragm and the lungs and all of that in the thoracic cavity that sort of changes something. I don't know, I'm not an expert, I don't know what it is, but I found it very interesting that she was like
aligning her Atlanta occipital joint on her spine when she's hanging upside down. So I'm not discounting that could be one factor, but there's something else happening.
The projection that was happening in her power, she said she had more power. And I was like, wow. So I don't know. So if you find that you're like, oh, when you're on your forward fold, there's something that's happening, right? So yeah, so kind of trying to remember or kind of find that sensation or remembering that sensation to be able to do it when you're upright.
Well, I just kind of go in and out of it and try to find, what does it feel like? And then I'm just sort of visualizing it. But, for practical purposes, it doesn't, work when you're standing on a stage, which of course we haven't been able to do for a very long time now. But, when I'm home doing these little recording projects, I'm often like sticking a yoga block between my legs or something to engage my lower body. I do it when I'm teaching too. I sit at the piano with the yoga block to get my pelvic floor and everything instead of checking out of it, checking in. And that seems to help me not get vocally tired. But anyway, but there's some kind of connection. And I think we've touched on it in your classes between this pelvic, and I know the vagus nerve goes all the way through there and wraps around your vocal cords.
No, but that pelvic is the same as the diaphragm.
That's what I'm doing in forward fold. When I slightly come up just a little bit from forward fold, I'm engaging pelvic floor to do that. Maybe, I don't know.
Probably, yeah, or it's already
engaged. Now I gotta go look up. Go. But anyway, sorry, we're off track for a while. We'll let it go.
Vienna, your hand is raised. Feel free to jump in, Vienna.
So I have a friend of mine who got a hysterectomy total several years back, and she was a singer in church, and she lost her ability to hit certain notes after her surgery. And because the vagal, I think it's connected. I'm just getting my perspective, but I'm thinking that vagus nerve is somewhere connected to that because it innervates all our reproductive organs down into our pelvic floor. And if like Pink was turned upside down, we don't lose the percentage of afferent fibers that go through the communication to the brain, right? And like Eva said, it's all connected in the, the throat and the lungs. So there might be something there. I don't know. I'm thinking now that I'm remembering her tell me that story, because she still to this day still can't reach those notes.
Can't reach those notes. Interesting. Thank you for sharing, Vienna. There's obviously there's everything is interconnected. But again, Eva, I'm not a singer. This is, I think, your dharma to be able to figure out these like little more interesting links. You know what I mean? To be able to help your students if they have similar problems to you. I'd love to see how you share that, like with the world, obviously, as it becomes more codified. When in the chat, it's talked about singing on suspension. So technically you can for a little bit, because you tend to you reserve about a liter of breath in your lungs when you exhale. And when you vocalize, after you think you have no more breath left, you'll be surprised that there's just a little bit left in there. And it's like, and it's definitely like, yeah, it's like very, like you're like pushing everything out. So I don't know about singing here. We're gonna have to talk singing it, but you can definitely do a mantra chant. And Gary has done that to kind of really kind of get that even more out. So next time, just on your own. Again, no food. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you've eliminated. You've no food in your belly. Try going in and out of just something simple like Tara Parivriti, revolved belly pose, right? And slow it down, chanting Om, just Om, as you exhale to one side and the other. And then stay in the center, exhaling and chant, or actually, no, not even chant, just exhale fully. And then hold the breath out and do that movement on suspension. So, taking it and finding that twist and turn, but try to chant Om as you're moving on suspension. And definitely you will find that you have, that all more breath is even out of your lungs. Retention, good. All right, but you can chant a little bit on suspension, and it's very, very interesting. But it's not like the same sort of chant that you can do on your exhale. But definitely it's a way to kind of really even deepen the effect of a twist or deepen the effect of suspension. Just FYI, so that's something we can have and be fun with. All right, moving on. When so the point was doing simple postures, right? Using retention and using inhale or exhale, or doing retention and suspension. I tend to like to break it down, so I would introduce maybe inhale first, lengthening the inhale, and then separately in a different posture, doing retention, and then combining the two in another simple posture later on, such as, for example, cobra pose, inhaling, 4 counts, pause at the top 2, and then exhaling, release, free breath, etc. Maybe then 6 and 3, 8 and 4. And the same way when we do exhale, introducing exhalations, like the lengthening of the exhalations first, separately in another thing, maybe doing suspension, and then combining the two later. It's something very simple. So it's like Chakravakasana, exhaling 4, hold the breath out 2 at the bottom. We won't do all 4 parts unless it's something like axial extension. So Mahamudra, like we did, which is similar to Janu Shirshasana, but doing something like that, finding all 4 parts of the breath, something like Siddhasana or Sukhasana, right? Something that has, even Dandasana you can do it, but it has to be very axial extension if you're going to do all of 4 at the same time. And that would not be the first thing you did in class. That would be at the end, as you've lengthened those parts separately. Let's see. So that would be what we do. And then we want to, ratios might not be, or at least, hard and fast, like strong, strict ratios, a lot of times aren't necessarily appropriate for drop-in classes. You know what I mean? When you don't have control over who's walking in the door, you know what I mean? And so I would suggest, doing something more specific, like a series or a workshop. Do you see what I'm saying? Where there's the same students that you can take, you know what I'm saying, and build this upon. Because if it's just like a random drop in, like it's too much, I think, for you guys to, it was for me to like hold, you know what I mean? Because people have different things and whatever. So you want like to be able to have the control over, like, we're building this, no one's left out, like, we've led them in this way. Simple lengthening of the breath is great for drop-in classes. So, especially lengthening exhale, as I mentioned, because of all the stimulation that we just have in our modern life with phones and, like stress of the world, like everything, like, your sympathetic nervous system is sort of like fried. So I would suggest always like lengthening exhale is always a very good thing to do. Easy, and it can be done. You don't even have to do it with a count. You can just, you can use sound, or just have them suggest like, hey, see if you can go to 4, maybe you can go to 6. If not, it's fine. Like just gentle suggestions of constantly like lengthening the exhale is fine. And again, typically if you are going to be using ratios, the most easy ones are basically very, very simple, like 1, 0, 2, 0, like just double the length of the exhale from the inhale. And you don't have to make it like specific in like it's we're doing 5 and 10. Like you can just say, hey, get to the point where, like you can double the length of your exhale, whatever count works for you. You know what I'm saying? And then also just 2, 1, 2, 1, I find to be also another one that's very, very good. So that, and that can be as simple as like 4, 2, 4, 2. You know what I mean? Inhaling 4, pause 2, and then exhaling 4, pause out 2, right? Very, very simple, very easy. When I teach suspension and retention, I always introduce retention first. So I would have the students just find, again, that lengthened inhale and exhale more even, right? So the idea of lengthening the breath, 1 count every other breath, and see, if you can maintain it either, at that count for a while, and then just start noticing those very natural pauses that are happening at the top and at the bottom of your inhale and exhale. And then let's just focus on maybe allowing that pause at the top of that inhale to get to be a like 1 second or 1 count, and just feel how that is, and exhaling fully and deeply. And then maybe see how it feels at 2, and just very, very like, simple, not agitated, reminding them to keep the throat relaxed and open, and not worrying about necessarily like math, right? Like we're doing this ratio. That's how I usually introduce the retention. And the same thing happens with the suspension. So again, noticing the natural pause that happens, because we all have it at the very bottom of the exhale, and then see about, maybe allowing it to get a little bigger, right? And then inviting them to experience, and then inhaling when you're ready, you just inhale, no worries, relax throat, blah, blah, blah. So try to keep it as stress-less as possible. And then as they get used to that, then, the next week I might be like, all right, we'll, find that pause again, doing it for 2 counts, and then maybe adding a little bit more structure. But when I first introduce, it's not structured. Like, it's not like, this many seconds, this many things. It's very, very relaxed, so that they can approach it from that perspective. Right, versus like, I gotta do this right, or I have to finish it, or I have to like hold my breath until she's ready, so that always then creates dissonance. No. So mantra was of course the traditional measuring time. Metronomes are helpful. I know Angela uses hers. Now we have apps, it's even cooler. And like, you don't have to carry around a little metronome. The classically Christian terms, like heartbeat is not a reliable method, obviously. And then Krishnamacharya, literally, he taught by counting out loud. Like he would do that, and that's useful if you find that useful. Doing so. One of my colleagues yoga teacher's name is Eduardo. We used to go by Wyo for a while, but Eduardo, he always counts, and he'd be like 1, 2, right? And so you're like, but that's very helpful. That can be very helpful for a student. I always found that this sometimes, like, there's certain clocks, and it's not always reliable, but it's almost like a metronome. But because it's above and on a wall, sometimes those clocks with the second hand is loud enough. The ticking is loud enough that it's already there, right? And so it's hopefully somewhat of an even repetition. For me, I don't count out loud because I don't know. I found, and maybe it's my Coptic nature, but I internalized a lot quicker. And so I always would get thrown off if somebody was counting for me. But I always try to do a little rhythm with my finger tap. You know what I mean? And so that also can be a very helpful way to kind of work. And that's what I do because if I'm not counting out loud, that's what I do to keep count for me, for how long, the students are inhaling or exhaling. You know what I mean? I have this sort of idea in my mind, like, okay, we're approximating the end of the rounds. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm keeping this count that's happening. Question. I know we have some talk on the thing about vagal nerves and cool things like that. Oh, Tiffany, here we go. The clock hidden in the closet. See what happens? It's like, well, oh no, but that's like what, the telltale heart, right? You know what I mean? Like, at least it's not underneath your floorboards. Like, but it's in the closet. Like, ooh. Yeah, that's funny.
I have a question, Anna Pilar.
Hi, Malik. Yeah.
Hello. You're talking about like the difference between drop-ins and series, and that makes sense. I'm curious as to where you think learning pranayama comes in terms of experience or exposure to yoga or the westernized understanding of yoga. So you're Susie, you go to a class at a yoga place or at a gym, what have you. And so you really only know that asana exists. You don't even know that there's other stuff. Would introducing pranayama to that student from the get-go make sense? Or is it something where Susie needs to hang out in just asana for a while before delving into pranayama?
That is a very interesting and loaded question.
I know. Well, and I'll give you my background. I'll give you a parameter. So I run a studio and I teach the yoga classes now, and I definitely come from the not realizing that there was more to yoga than just asana background. But I'm getting a lot personally out of incorporating pranayama into my practice, and I feel very strongly about not continuing the sort of whitewashing of yoga if I'm going to offer it as something that I teach. So my inclination is to introduce pranayama and, talking about the other aspects, but I don't know when it makes sense to do so on a like pedagogical level. Like, am I just over enthusiastic, or is there a time when this should come in learning?
Okay, awesome. Thank you for the context, actually, because that helps me formulate. So, okay. Whenever we learn something new and we're excited about it, right? We want to go tell everybody. And I get that, right? And it's happened to me, too. Don't forget, I started off in a more of a Ashtanga practice, and then Gary changed my entire view on yoga in my life, right? And I remember coming back, like at that time, getting so I had gotten a 200 hour, and then I did a 500 hours with him, like a whole separate 500 hour. And it was over 2 years and broken down in these like kind of 2-week segment type of deals. And I remember coming back after that first 2 weeks, and literally, and he had told us, he's like, don't change the way you are teaching. Cause all of us had, some people weren't yoga teachers, but a lot of people were already yoga teachers. He's like, until you practice this for a while and fully integrate it into your body. And I tell you, it was the hardest thing to do, because I was like, I don't know if I can teach the way I used to teach. And it was like, you know what I mean? And it was like, what do you mean slowing everything down and doing all this? And so it was really, really, really hard. And it kind of felt like, I'm lying. Like, do you know what I mean? I was like, this is false. So I had to take a deep breath and get over myself for a little bit. But I started introducing, so as my personal practice changed, I still could teach basically what I did before, because it's something that you're still familiar with, right? You can do it in your sleep, right? But then I would figure out ways, as my personal practice changed, I would figure out ways how to add a little bit of the difference in just a few postures during the sequence. And I would also gauge to see how the reaction was to my students, because the students were literally coming because they liked the way I was teaching before. And then all of a sudden it's like, ta-da, new version. They're like, whoa, right? Like it's a little much. And so I slowly integrated it. And then asked for a different type of style of class on a different time at a schedule. Do you see what I'm saying? To like then be able to differentiate and work on then how to language this different way that I was practicing into teaching. So there's always that too, you know what I mean? Because you can when you start practicing it, that doesn't quite mean that you can yet language it effectively, right? Because you're still trying to figure out like, what am I actually doing in my body, right? And so I would say it's, if you were somebody who already had been learned, like had been taught all these things from the get-go, then I would say, of course, you just teach it to the beginners, of course. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I wouldn't necessarily teach them intricate ratio or intricate valve. I teach them ujjayi, you know what I mean, and how to control that valve, making it soft versus making it, heat warmer, right, more loud, so more stimulating. So I would teach them that kind of variance, and I would teach them the awareness of lengthening exhale and maybe exploring a little bit of retention and suspension, but never like, not in like a real intense way, right? Like just exploration first. That's, I would say, any sort of over a course of 6 months, any sort of beginner style, right? But as somebody, and again, I came from the same thing you are, like, I wasn't taught that stuff to begin with. And then it changed my view of practice. And I'd already been teaching for like 2 or 3 years before I met Gary. So it was like, oh, so it's, I would say, don't rock the boat fully yet, slowly integrate it. If that makes, you know what I mean, a little bit of, if that connects in how you can do this, since you own the studio, correct?
I founded it. It's a nonprofit, but yeah, so it's
okay,
mine.
But
no one's hired me. I do whatever I would like to do.
Okay.
Like,
so then,
there's no. Yeah.
So the reason I'm asking is because you don't have to then convince, you know what I mean, management, like, I want to try this different type of class. And then they're going like, this is a vinyasa studio. What do you mean you're going to be doing this, like, weird hatha stuff where you're doing dynamic movement only in the posture and manipulating breath? Like, you don't have to argue for that. You can be like, okay, I'm making this class. And it could be something.
I didn't teach yoga before. So I started this program, the 200 hour, and finished that, which is when I created my own practice and when I've learned about all of this. That all happened before I was in front of a classroom for yoga. I've been teaching other things for over 15 years, but so it's more, it's less about me and my teaching style. It's more about when and I think you just answered it, like starting with the lighter bits of the pranayama with a beginning student. So they're experiencing things like ujjayi breath and getting their body used to being in the various positions simultaneously. And then if that path, the ujjayi, and then lengthening the exhale, and then starting to do the retention and suspension, not in that order, that order, retention and suspension. By the time they've done all that while they're also practicing the physical asana, then they would be ready to dip into more of the ratios and the other things that we've learned over the course of this week.
Yes.
Presuming at the same time I'm doing my own thing and I'm getting them into my own practice and my own understanding. But I wasn't sure what like the right way to honor the roots of yoga would be to introduce these things to students.
Yeah, I would definitely always introduce, like, again, if it's appropriate. I mean, again, if you're at a gym and they're like, we're not doing any chanting, we don't do anything in Sanskrit, you know what I mean? There's like those types of things. Then teach how you need to teach to keep your livelihood at the establishments that you're at. Okay, you don't need to rock the boat yet. But you have a unique situation where like you get to do it, like this is yours, like you. And I would say, you know, I think it's important that we honor you know, this amazing tradition in that, and educating the students who are called, or at least to come, that it's not just stretching. I mean, yes, we are stretching, but there's all this other stuff, you know. And I've even and again, because I got to teach at a studio, I even introduced the yamas and the niyamas. So again, you know, I had an 8-week beginner series. From the very first class, right, we learned foundational postures. Yes, I taught them how to do ujjayi, like very gently. And again, I said, you might not happen, you might not get it, you might not, it might be till the class 8 that it actually makes sense, but we're gonna, you know, we're, you know, a little mirror. And I taught them the very first yama of ahimsa. Like so they got philosophy, they got breath, and they got, you know, I mean, the foundational, like how I sit. This is called shavasana, right? Tadasana. This is how we stand. Like the foundations for all of those different the foundational postures for all those different foundations and spinal actions, and to kind of go through in the 8 weeks. And it worked perfectly because you have 8. You know, we have the, you know, the yamas and niyamas, but we also have, you can also do the 8 limbs. So I could either break it down and just do, you know, yamas and niyamas and like, you know, add a few together, but like, or I could do each one of those limbs separately, like, you know what I mean, as a container, a whole. So there was lots of options, but at least like it's like they're getting that it's not just an exercise regimen, right? And I'm like, and you can, but again, I'm like, this is for you. You can take this or leave this. You can always just think of this as an exercise regimen. That's totally fine. But you know, but it is, you know, it is, you know, it would be a detriment to tell you it is otherwise. And so I'm going to share with you, you know, what all the philosophy and the concepts are behind this, because you might find that it does change a little bit in the way you view the world. And I want you to understand why. And you know what I mean? Because it's literally, by the time someone's done, you know, 8 weeks of yoga, they're going to feel a difference. Right. And, you know, I did that consistently for like 10 years. I taught beginner series in these like sort of 8-week formats. And literally very rarely did someone not at the end of the 8 weeks be like, wow, like I'm a lot nicer and calmer. You know what I mean? Even when it came, like, my road rage had gone way down. Like, you know, there's some sort of effect, and you're like, well, yes, welcome to Santosha, welcome to Ahimsa, welcome. You know what I mean? They're all already in there. You're just now seeing like they're flourishing out. So, so yes, I would say if you have the ability, start at the very beginning. You know, set them up with that good foundation. Let me share my screen one more time. because, thank you, Malik. That was a very excellent question. So I do appreciate that for sure. I wanted to show the planning. Okay. Planning, class planning. So I have this little sort of, that sort of easily turns into this. So I'm going to share my screen. And feel free if anybody else, has another question or whatnot, please. All right, this is just, an example, guys. You don't need to take this as like, commandments or something on, chiseled in stone. But this is sort of like the idea of like week by week planning, okay? So either week or the class number, because sometimes classes, are not going to necessarily be week by week. Maybe it's like every other week or a month. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? You figure it out how you want to do it. I wouldn't necessarily do this all in a row. You know what I mean? Like give people some space. So like, class 1 or week 1, it's just the idea of directional flow. You know what I'm saying, of breath. And I might talk a little bit about, so if this is like specific for, like I'm doing going to be a series about breath. This is not just like public drop-in classes what I'm talking about. This is like, hey, I want to work on, making sort of this pranayama series. And so this is how I would sort of start. Okay. So definitely teach them directional flow. So this is the idea of that chest to belly, belly to chest on exhale, right? So inhale, chest to belly, exhale, belly to chest. And, start thinking about the pranayama that what we would do would be the Viloma Krama. So just, segmenting the exhale. And that again is going to be toning also their abdominals. So the talking points is like number 1, teaching ujjayi, and 2, abdominal contraction on exhale. What are the asanas that support this? It's going to be forward bends, twists, and axial extension, and the breath adaptation of the asana will be lengthening the exhale, right? So having them actively, it doesn't have to be through a count, just actively like see if you can slow it down. And of course you can add count. This would be, I would say, would this be like a beginner series? No, this would be like seasoned. I would say if somebody has at least an asana or like a regular yoga practice for like 3 months, 6 months, something like that, where it's not like you having to teach all the beginning, like how to teach just very simple postures. You want to be beyond that, right? So like what I was talking with Malik is that, when you're teaching beginners, you're teaching the foundational stuff of simple postures, and the same thing in ways you're going to be teaching simple things of breath. So ujjayi, just simple lengthenings of exhale. You don't need to do complex ratios, just having their awareness be on the breath. And then so this would be like if you've had these people for a bit and you're like, okay, we're going to do this pranayama or like series. And so, if they are not familiar with ujjayi, hopefully they are by that time, you want to make sure you review ujjayi. And then again, this idea of like krama, segmentation. Then the next class would be anuloma krama, so the segmented of inhale, because this again is really good for them to figure out and tone the musculature, right, of their respiratory musculature. So this would be now axial extension, back bends, and laterals, right, because we're doing inhale. So the idea is to lengthen the inhale and review ujjayi, chest expansion on inhale, okay? And remember, inhale should be even or equal to exhale. So when you're working with the inhale, always cueing, keep the exhale long, right? Just having the, they don't have to count, just long exhale. Then I would talk about energies, right? So energetics. So, I would teach them a Brahmana practice with simple Brahmana ratio would be like the sort of pranayama that we did at the end. Again, axial extension, back bends, laterals. We're in the asana, we're going to be lengthening the inhale. It's very similar like they already did, but then work a little bit with retention after. So the talking points would be, of course, the energetic effects, Brahmana, Langana, and Samana. The, even telling them like, hey, we're going to be working a little bit with holding the breath after inhale during our asana. And then, and how that preps for the ratio, and then how to safely do retention. So again, yes, Grace, I made this chart for you guys. You're going to talk about how to safely do retention. This is important, guys. Because when, with suspension, it's people will inhale. But with retention, it's the idea, don't bear down, like don't create that when people like, you know what I mean? Like you can actually see it and you can hear it a little bit, and if you can't hear it when they hold it, when they first initiate it, you'll hear it when they release it, right? So if they're bearing down and creating and like kind of locking themselves in that retention, there's a release, there's a loud release. And so you want to make sure that when you're in that retention, keep the neck relaxed, keep the throat relaxed and open. You know what I'm saying? Like you want to make sure that you're teaching them how not to like bear down on that retention. So make sure, because that's where we get the issues with arrhythmia, cardiac arrhythmia and all that stuff. Like we don't want to do that. All right, then I would talk, and the reason why we're doing, thank you, Vienna. The reason why I'm into, even though yes, retention is it's more risky physiologically, the reason why I'm introducing it first is because mentally suspension kind of freaks people out most of the time. So, I want to kind of mentally ease them into this idea of pausing, right, with retention and suspension. So, I'm going to then, for the most part, for the general public, most people are happier with inhale and retention. So I'm going to introduce that first. And then we're going to introduce Longana, and we're going to introduce the suspension. And so, again, always coming back to this idea of ujjayi, that they're still, using that, but we're doing forward bends, twists, axial extension, lengthening the exhale, and again, working with a short suspension after the exhale. And then reviewing, like the talking points is reviewing what we all did with review classes 3 and 4, no, sorry, not 3, sorry, this is wrong. It should be 1 to 3. And then so I'll change that before I put this up there. And I'll change it during lunch because this is a PDF. I always like things with PDF. So they're going to review what's happening in this idea, and then, so review this, and then, the reason why we do chest expansion and abdominal contraction, and then we're going to review, of course, what Longana effect. And then working on samana. So then we use sort of the samana ratio and the balance of the direction of movement. So we're doing combinations, right, of back bends and forward bends, or maybe we're doing, combination of back bends and twist, or laterals and twist, or laterals and forward folds. You know what I mean? You don't have to do all of them, but, you pick the ones that work for your students that are in the category of Brahmana and the category of Longana, right? And then, lengthening the inhale and retention in the first half of the class, and then lengthen the exhale and short suspension in the second half of class. The reason why we do that is because this is, of course, engaging the sympathetic nervous system, and we want people to be calm and relaxed before we do pranayama. So we work on the parasympathetic nervous system, and that way, it's the idea of that sort of, where you kind of build a class and then we kind of move down the energy, right? So this is the idea. And then you review again the content of class 3, and then how to safely do suspension, again, is the idea of not locking or contracting, but keeping that throat open, and then saying, hey, it's okay if, and again, more of the safety for suspension is, if your mind freaks out a bit, then just inhale. It's fine. You just inhale, just count faster than for the suspension, or just, keep it, keep it shorter if you need to, so that it's relaxed and your mind is okay. So, that's how we do that. And then the idea of, so after we've done this samana practice, now we're going to be looking at Longana practice with Anuloma Ujjayi. So this is that lengthen of the exhale. So it's alternate nostril exhalation. And so that is what is soothing to the nadis, right? It's with the grain, so it's soothing on the exhale of the nadis. So now we're starting to introduce the benefits of valving. So that you might mention that, yeah, Ujjayi is a valve, it's a throat valve, but they're not going to really get that until, they're not going to really understand valving until they start having to valve nostrils or use their tongue, right? Then it's like, oh, right? Because at this point, when someone even is doing just Ujjayi, they're just, it kind of like, it doesn't, it's not like an outward expression, right? So it sort of becomes like that valve, that it's a valve sort of becomes, it's back in the back of their mind. But this is not going to bring the valving to the forefront, because now you also have to teach them the mudra, right? So then, I should put that in there. Sorry, I'll remember to do that. The Mrigni mudra. So what mudra you're using to valve the nostrils. You might. This is a nice opportunity to talk about some of the subtle, the subtle body, so the energies of the channels, right? So the Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. You don't have to, of course, but this gives you an opportunity to start expanding their awareness of different systems of the body, right? Or energetic systems, the energetic anatomy of the body. And then, so there's a couple of different ways you can go here. So you could do, instead of doing a samana practice, this would then move to number 8, and you could do, for example, if you want to take it like more step by step, you could do the Brahmana practice with the Viloma Ujjayi, okay, which would be then just think about the opposite here. But I also wanted to do this other valve, so I jumped right into the Samana practice with Nadi Shodhana, and so then they're going to be, so I will definitely, they're going to be experimenting, since they already know how to, or they're used to, they've had a little bit of experience from the last class of valving on exhale. It's not a big hump to then learn to valve on inhale. And so then we can then talk about Nadi Shodhana. Okay. And that's a samana. And then kind of for this one particular, showing them another way that they can use this alternate nostril exhalation with that cooling breath of Shitali or Sitkari. And again, this is sort of this other sort of idea of tongue valving, right? If I wanted to kind of get them to know sort of all the different types of valves, but that doesn't necessarily have to be. You can just have this as the Brahmana practice with Viloma Ujjayi, and then move Nadi Shodhana down here. But I find this one to be very interesting because it's cooling in a lot of different ways. In the system, it creates definitely throat and upper chest. You can feel a temperature difference. But when you add the alternate nostrils, it's also very sedating and cooling, calming for the nadis. And so I find that to be this can be very helpful if you, one of my friends had a great success, and again, I have not experienced this yet, but I will be eventually soon. They found that doing this was very, very helpful for menopause and is it premenopause? Like, so the sort of heating and sweats, and you wake up in the middle of the night, you're like, I'm so freaking hot, she did the Shitali with the alternate nostril breath with some good success. So I'm excited to try that out, in the next 5 years or so, when that starts happening for me. So I can't speak to my experience yet about this particular one, but my friend definitely found great comfort in that particular one, which is why I wanted to add it to here, because not to marginalize Dimitri, but most of the people showing up to classes these days in our trainings are women. So hey, here you go. Here's a nice little tool. All right. So questions about, and you would also use the same, for example, you could do the Anuloma and Viloma Ujjayi and then do Pratiloma. You know what I'm saying? If you wanted to skip Nadi Shodhana, or do Anuloma, Viloma Ujjayi, and then Nadi Shodhana, and then Pratiloma Ujjayi, which is that kind of expanded one. So if you wanted to add an extra day, you could do that as well. But this kind of gives you the idea of kind of how to, this is an example. All right. Thank you.
Pilar, how do you get the marks on the letters? Like, how do you do like this?
How I get the diacritical marks?
Yeah, because I do it probably a very difficult way, and I'm wondering if there's an easier one.
Yeah, so for like, when you're typing, you mean?
Yeah.
This is what takes me so long, getting my slides and stuff all ready and all that, because I'm very anal and about the diacritic marks. I find that if I can use something like when I use Word, I have to insert special character, and then it's usually like I can find most of them in the Latin version, but certain typefaces don't have them. That doesn't work. It doesn't exist. You know what I mean? So I find that I think New Times Roman and Times New Roman, and then Georgia. Some of these actually they actually do have this. You know what I mean? Like these marks are available, and so it's that kind of insert special character idea, and then. I pick Latin, and then there's a way, and at least the version I have, that you can it kind of remembers, like it becomes like a favorites, and so then it's easier to pull from. Again, I am not amazingly tech savvy, so I'm sure there's probably like a easier way to do that. Like there might be a way that you can assign those special characters to like a command, whatever, you know what I mean, like of the letter, but I don't know any of that yet. So
how many letters are in Sanskrit? Do you know?
Yes. Oh my God, I know this. Hold on. 50.
Because I'm wondering if you can like have like one Word document with like all of the letters, and then that way you can do them side by side and just copy paste when you need them.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it for sure. To have like a second thing.
The marks help me.
Let me look here. All right. So, okay. So, if you're looking at combinations, so, okay. So the Sanskrit alphabet itself, right, is so 25, and then plus 4, so plus 16. Okay, so let me do math in the head. I have to use a calculator. There's 25 consonants. There's 4 semivowels, 5 sibilants, and 16 vowels. All right, here, I'll do the math for 1 second. But that doesn't mean that's all the diacritical marks, if that makes sense. So, all right, 25 plus.
So it's a lot.
16. I think it's like 50. So it's 50, and then I think there's 50 or 51, because there's one that's like there's like the no sound one. You know what I mean? But I would say, let me look here, because I'm looking at for all these things. There is, because there are consonants that have dots below them, such as H's, T's, R's, M's, and N's, and S's. And then there are vowels that have the long line on top, such as A's, U's, and I's, as I recall. And then there's the sharp thing. Oh, good. Look, see, there's a thing here. Wow, that's awesome. On the backward curve, you press the letter special characters. Yes, but I don't have them for the R or H. Yeah, I have to find those somewhere else. But that's why they think copy and paste. But I'm going to check out what Malik has here too. That's probably cool. Ooh. See, I know people are much better at this than I am. But I would say for the most part, if you're doing, and I just get all like, nerdy about it, but for the most part, I would say the main ones would be the long horizontal on top of those vowels are more important, and then the S's with the slash mark of the dot. When it comes to like the dot under the H or the dot under the R or the dot under the M, that doesn't matter. I mean, technically that means that your tongue is up when you're making those sounds, like Sanskrit or Samskrit, like the tip of the tongue is up with the dot. but you don't, most, I think, American people are not going to care if you do that or not. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, so, you can just do the sh or the long vowels, I think, is the more important ones when it comes to that. Okay, dokie. But good question. Yes. All right. Let me see what this is. Like, okay, good. So someone has it for Windows and someone has it for, cool. For, nice. Cool. All right. Yay. And what? You guys are so awesome. Yay. All right. So, all right. So questions or comments about the sort of, the week by week planning, right? Does this resonate with everybody, sort of like in the idea of like the step by step and why we would do this? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay. All right. So let me stop sharing my screen. Oh, okay. Perfect. All right. So opening it up again for more questions or comments. So yes, Dimitri, have a good night. I know it's very late. He's in Thailand, so he's on the other side of the world. So thank you for participating and coming as often as you have. I know it is not the normal hours. So thank you. All right. So bring in my favorites. Yay. All right. Other comments, questions, thoughts about this? Any questions about the practices that we did? Again, all of this is going to be, I'll make sure it's all uploaded in the Learning Lab. All right, feel free to jump in. When we come back from lunch, what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about the homework, right? And then I'm going to have us do a little, probably do sort of kind of breakout rooms. I'm going to try this breakout room stuff. I don't know if it's going to work, but we're going to try to break out into different little rooms. And then, so like, we'll figure out how many people do come back, and then we'll figure out like how many people in the room. So you guys will have a little contact with your room. 3 dots in the chat window, then save chat. Okay. And that way we can start to think about and strategize about the homework, right? And so, and talk about our personal practice and like what we want to do. Like, it's always good to, I think, to sort of riff on each other, you know what I'm saying? If you kind of see like, what do you think of this or this, or this is the morning, or da. So, because everyone has interesting perspectives. And so I think it's kind of a fun way to build a community too. So this is what we're going to talk about. Okay, so with that,
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry,
Yes, Charlotte.
I'm out walking the dogs. Well,
No
I'll try
worries.
to get it over in, and it's snowing, so hopefully the screen doesn't
Wow.
do anything funny.
Where are you? Where are you? Where do you live? Like,
I'm in Telkwa, BC, in Canada.
oh,
so.
That's right. You're a Canadian. Oh, the mighty maple leaf. It's awesome. All right. So yes, it's snowing. Oh my goodness. Okay.
So my question is, if we're doing the 300 hours and we're not in the yoga therapy training program, are we still able to participate in this, like in the aspect of, I know we don't have to be quizzed on this 50 hours of pranayama, but are we still able to participate in the part 2 in December?
Yes, of course. Yes, please. And feel free to do the homework if you want to. It's not, but if you're just in the 300 hour, you're not in applied or in module 1, you're not required to do the homework. But I would say it's fun to do the homework because it's going to be breathing practices. And so that way you can kind of, you know what I'm saying, learn a little bit more about how your body works with this, you know, with
Yes,
these.
thank you. So I just was curious, and I do teach a little bit of pranayama in my classes already. So I was
Nice.
just like, and because I do it myself, but I'm like, some of these are interesting, and so I'm like, this is good. It's nice to learn and to teach. So thank you so much for including us
Of
300ers.
course.
So
You're welcome,
have
Charlotte.
have
Anytime.
I'm just gonna log off now. I'm not gonna log
Yeah,
off, but I'm gonna click you off. Thank you so much for everything. I totally appreciate you.
of course. Thank you. Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, so if you are, just to be clear, if you guys are in the 300 hour, you are not required to do the homework, obviously. But if you are in applied and, in the yoga therapy module 1, please, you must be doing homework. And because we're going to be talking about your experiences of the homework come in December. And we're going to be then talking a little bit more about strategies when it comes to yoga therapy or private clients as well. It doesn't necessarily be yoga therapy client, but it could be just like a small group of privates, and the ways we can use breath. So with that, all right, so let's why don't we just take a break? Like, let's just break early for lunch. Again, it's like, I think it's just 10 minutes early, but I think that always is good to give a little extra digestion time and some sort of decompression time, and also be able for you guys to like stand up and walk around if you've been sitting listening to the lecture all morning. Again, there's not going to be there's no practice. So, feel free to, eat whatever you would like to eat this time around, if it is lunchtime for you. Otherwise, enjoy your small break, your hour break, and we'll see you guys back at 1 Central Standard Time in about an hour and 10 minutes. Sound good for everybody? Well, I don't hear any complaints, so. Yay. All right. Well, Michaela, have a good time at your board meeting. We'll miss you in the afternoon. All right. Thumbs up. Yay. Okay. I'm going to pause.